Debt that we call the debt. When you look at it, the law is very clear that for government to borrow, it must have the approval of Parliament. And number two, it can only borrow to finance two things. One, development, and two, short-term cash flow challenges, which should be, let's assume there's a delay in collecting tax, and the tax is due. The government can borrow some little money, continue operating, and when the taxes come, it pays off. It doesn't become a public debt. But you'll find that we've got things called the treasury bills and treasury bonds, which have been used to borrow money that does not go into any development. If you look at that money, it goes to no development, and the domestic debt is never approved by Parliament. If you look at all appropriations acts, there's nowhere that domestic debt is approved. But you find that we are having a very big domestic debt, which is basically a Ponzi scheme now that we are now borrowing to pay debt. Borrowing to pay debt, borrowing to pay debt, which should not be the case. And the Ponzi scheme is basically that the consolidated fund is supervised by Parliament through an Appropriation Act and by the control of budget. So it becomes very difficult to get money out of it. But if you create a debt onto the consolidated fund, then you can get money out of the consolidated fund in the form of interest on the purported debt. And this is a scheme that I believe involves local banks. It involves some state corporations, which take money they are used to do operations to go buy treasury bills and treasury bonds. And it involves some well-connected individuals. And I think as we stand today, in the last 9 years, we have paid about 2.6 trillion in interest on this kind of unauthorized borrowing. So the money there still really becomes the interest that we are forced to pay on those loans that we don't require to do anything, that are borrowed domestically and are borrowed illegally. Because when you make a budget, the law requires that the budget be balanced. And from our taxes, we are supposed to finance our recurrent expenditure and also to finance our development expenditure. And where there's a deficit, the deficit should be on the development side, so that we now borrow to finance development. And you'll find that even in the current budget, if you look at the development side of things, it's well balanced. The borrowings are there, the loans are already declared, which are going to be the finance ABCD. So there's no deficit in the budget. So the question is, if through taxation we are raising enough money to pay our current expenditure and part of our development expenditure, why are we going onto the domestic market to borrow money that we don't need and pay heavy interest on that money? It can only be a scam involving local banks, involving civil servants in the treasury and other places where the finances are controlled, involving some state corporations which also participate in a big way in this treasury, in the treasury bills and stuff. Otherwise, I don't see how you can generate a deficit in the current budget, whereby the budget is tied to projects and the deficits are already taken care of by the loans that we get. The other area that in the budget, and if you look at the budget today, you'll get what they call appropriation in aid. The big budget of the loans we get are also unconstitutional to the extent that no money comes into Kenya. The money remains offshore, and they're called appropriation in aid, whereby somebody says we are giving you a loan of 10 shillings, but we will not give you the money. Our people will come and do the work for the 10 shillings. The Parliament of Kenya has no say over those kind of expenditures. The control of budget has no say over those kind of expenditures. And so they are basically done outside the law, and are one major area whereby the public is losing a lot of funds. And I think as a republic, as a nation, we need to come to ourselves and ask, are we going to continue accepting loans that come in the nature of appropriation in aid? And if you look at the current, Appropriation Act, most of the loans that are coming in are appropriation in aid. It means they are bringing the debt to Kenya, not the money. And that's how we are ending up in this kind of mess. And also if you look at also earlier on, as I said, and you look at the debt registers, and you look at the payments we're supposed to have made, you'll also find that we have overpaid these funny debts that we're having. So there's a time that this country we should look at each other in the eye and say that we have a law and let us follow the law and save this republic from collapse. Because if we don't do that, it's going to collapse. Right now, when President Ruto took over, the exchange rate between the Kenya shilling and the Uganda shilling, I use Uganda because I come from Busia, was 36 shillings. 2 days ago, I made a transaction on the border and the exchange rate was 20 shillings. So if the economy is bad all over the world, why is the Ugandan economy appreciating against ours? And Uganda is a very tiny economy. Why is it appreciating against ours? So things are not well, and we need to have an honest discussion. Forget about everything else and say, let us fix the economy. Without the economy, you have got no nation. That's all.